Hello, hello, everybody. We're so happy you're here today. It's a pleasure to have you. Hello, everybody. We're so happy you're here today. Hold on, I've got some echo. I can figure that out. It's a pleasure to have you. Hello, everybody. We're so happy you're here today. Hold on, I've got some echo. All right. Well, technical glitches are part of the trade, so we'll just work with that. It is such a pleasure to have you all here today. Hello. My name's Diane Buis. I'm here at MedTech Innovator, where I'm director of the US program. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to MedTech Innovator Live. This is number 9 of our series of weekly webinars that we do as part of the Accelerator program that runs for 4 months as an opportunity for the 88 companies across our 3 cohorts to learn from experts all across the ecosystem. And for those joining us on the live stream, MedTech Innovator is the largest accelerator of medical devices in the world. And it's a downstream accelerator, which means that we're not looking for people with ideas, but companies that are up and running, have teams and prototypes and early evidence that the technology works, and then partner them with experts in the industry, strategics, and others to help them bring their product as quickly and efficiently to the market as possible, with as much value as possible. And we're opening up our webinars to our broader ecosystem beyond just the cohort. So if you're on the live stream, feel free to put your questions in the chat. And for our cohort companies, you can make use of the Zoom Q&A function, and we'll try to ask the questions in the hour that we have together. And once we conclude that 1-hour live stream, speakers, if you can, please stay on for the extra 30 minutes of live Q&A with just the cohort companies. And so with that, it's a real privilege to have a panel that really represents different aspects of this talent conversation that we're having today. It's talent is at the core of every startup. And we've all been involved with talent. And we all know just how important it is. And these panelists bring a lot of experience on the topic to the table. And so rather than butchering their experience and background, I'll ask them individually to introduce themselves. And I'll start with Danica Elliott. Danica, would you tell us about yourself and tell us about your organization?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Danica Elliott, head of human capital at Fraser Life Sciences, part of Fraser Healthcare Partners' 30-year legacy of healthcare investing, a dedicated healthcare portfolio. I oversee team and talent diligence, assessments, and people topics for our life sciences portfolio. So to date, that's brainstorming and working with talent acquisition with over 200 startup CEOs. I'll stop there.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I'll pass the baton to Ingrid Ellerby. Ingrid, where are you and what do you do?
Thank you, Diane. So I'm Ingrid Ellerby. I am the Executive Director of Diversity by Doing Health Tech. That comes out of Stanford Biodesign and Fogarty Innovation. And our primary mission is to really enhance diversity and equity in the health tech ecosystem, particularly focused on small and mid-sized companies, because we believe if you start paying attention to it early, it becomes part of who you are.
I appreciate that. And Lauren Solano, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So thanks, Dan. So I'm Lauren Solano. So I'm the co-founder of a company called Propel Careers, based in Boston. And I've been in life sciences now about 22 years, the last 13 of which has been focused on recruiting. And it's been really fun to work with entrepreneurial organizations, 2 people, 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, to help them hire across the life sciences sector. So therapeutics, devices, diagnostics, healthcare IT.
And at least the cohort, some of the folks may already know Neda, but Neda Hanafi, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Diane, and hello, everyone. So I'm Neda Hanafi. I am a Senior VP for Verinex, which is a sponsor of MedTech Innovator, and we provide consulting services in the regulatory space. And I guess what's more dearer to my heart is also I'm a founder of MedTech Color. So Ingrid and I share a shared passion and a shared mission here, We're a nonprofit. We were founded in 2018, and we're working to diversify medtech, basically. We know that people of color and women need to be in rooms where critical decisions are being made. And that's currently not the status. And to develop products that are meaningful for the end user and our diverse population, you really need to have folks with lived experiences helping you develop those products so that we can have better outcomes. So our goal is really to increase the inclusion or the number of people who enter medtech who are from a diverse background, stay in medtech, and then make it through to the key decision-making roles. So we can have better health outcomes for all. So thanks for having me. Excited to have this discussion.
Very excited to have you. And last, certainly not least, Ray Mead. Tell us a little bit about TriNet and yourself.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Ray Mead here. Spent the earlier part of my career actually behind an HR desk working for a number of different startups. And the last 15 years have been in the PEO, professional employer organization industry, the last 8 of those with TriNet. What we're doing is we're providing a unique single vendor model for all things related to human resources. I manage the life sciences practice for TriNet, and a large part of our value proposition to our clients has to do with better positioning them to compete for talent. It's obviously fiercely competitive out there, as we're going to talk about a little bit here. We're there to help level the playing field for our small to mid-sized business clients in the life sciences sector.
I appreciate those introductions. And folks, what you can see is we have a panel that brings really different and rich experiences to this discussion. So I want to start by level setting on just everything that we hear about talent out there. The Great Resignation, boomerang employees, quiet quitting. Does that equally apply? What do you see as the current status or the current state of talent in our industry? And I might just start with Lauren. Lauren, what do you see?
So there definitely is still, it's very intense to find talent. It's very intense to find good talent. It's very competitive right now. You know, unemployment's very low. And for a lot of the startup companies, many of us are looking for similar types of talent. So a lot of us are competing with ourselves in some cases for the great engineers and, you know, quantitative backgrounds and other backgrounds that could be helpful to companies here. So I guess one thing, and we'll talk about this in a little bit though, one thing I've been finding is a lot of talent feels sometimes unfulfilled in what they're doing, which presents some really unique opportunities for innovative startups. They're going to change the world. And so we'll talk more about this, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to gather really top talent from, let's say, larger organizations to join, you know, startup world to be able to help really influence the work that you're doing.
That's really interesting to hear. Neda, where do you see things?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of competition out there, and people are drawn to what drives them, what wakes them up in the morning. So I think, Lauren, you're hitting it. Why are we in medtech? We're trying to develop products that are going to improve outcomes. At the heart of it is patients. So I think to draw the right talent in is to be working on an unsolved problem that's really going to help better outcomes for patients. So I think that's where you'll find your talent, your assets. I don't like to call people assets, but I know that's the business world. But that's where they'll stay, and that's where they'll do their best work, and that's where they want to join. And I also think being a CEO or leadership team that's really committed to the cause around the product you're developing can take you a long way to get in the right folks to help support building that product out and getting it to the market.
Danica, it's an integral part of what you do to identify and grow talent for the startups that you work with. How does it look from your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, every industry is feeling this shift and this disruption. I think it's a couple of factors that everyone's keeping track of, right? The economy, how COVID impacted the work-life balance. And we do see that employees and potential employees are driving this shift. There's a lot of reevaluating happening. So what is the purpose? Why do I spend time commuting? Why am I getting on airplanes again? And so, there's a lot of that reevaluating. And so if you can tap into the purpose that both Lauren and Neda talked about, what purpose you celebrate within the workplace, how are you balancing and creating essentially a success plan for an individual employee? How do you see challenges increasing as the growth of the company goes on? If you can tap into that story and map out that story and really listen to what the candidates are talking about that's important to them, I think you can make that connection really easily. And, even just presenting that information quickly and efficiently can really get a candidate excited.
Appreciate that perspective. And I think one of the things we just touched on lightly in introductions is how we look at recruiting. An earlier version, working title of this talk included or spelled out how to find and recruit diverse talent. And I then removed that word from the title because to me, it is obvious that great talent includes diverse talent. But if it's obvious to me, is it obvious to other people? How do we talk about this in recruiting today? I might ask Ingrid for a first comment there. Is that understood? How do we discuss diverse talent when we talk about talent? You're on mute. Because it is that type of day.
Yes, no, I'm so glad that you made that change, because we need to no longer have it outside of the universe. It needs to be part and parcel of what we do as a standard. And the more we segment it, the more it stays segregated and segmented. So that's the first thing that I say. And I have people ask me all the time if it's really important. And to me, there's two pieces to that. One is, of course, there's a financial return. You can look at McKinsey reports, you can look at Harvard Business Review. Everybody talks about the ROI, but where does that come from? It comes from something that Neda was talking about. When you have people with different lived experiences that join your organization, all of a sudden you have a different lens on whatever solution you're driving to. It really opens up your aperture. So I would say that it's critical from that standpoint, but it's also critical that if you're interested in doing this work as a company, it's important to develop your own internal strategy to work around. And there are a lot of people that do work in this area. I think some of them are on the phone. But if you look at it, there are 4 or 5 different steps that you can take to make sure you're very explicit about the candidates that you're seeking, how you attract them, where you go to hire them, the interview process, what you do to have them stay, which is, to me, I'm way past I've got diverse talent into I want to keep and support and elevate my diverse talent. So, I mean, there are a lot of pieces there that I will talk about too long. So I'm just going to stop there and say, yes, it is incredibly important.
I appreciate that that answer. I'm going to bring in Ray. Ray, TriNet serves lots of companies with their talent needs and HR needs, and so you've been in the industry for a while. How do you look at how do we talk about recruiting talent, and how explicit should an organization be about recruiting diverse talent?
Yeah, I think being a diverse workforce and being committed to that. It's really important. As has been previously stated, I mean, if you cover your eyes and just hire the talent, I think when you open your eyes, you're going to see a pretty diverse group in front of you, right? But you do want to be purposeful. The other thing that I'll say is a lot of candidates are very interested in working in a diverse environment. They want to be involved. They want to participate. Be encouraged to, whether it's donating time or getting involved in other organizations, it's really important to them. So you want to be cognizant of that and purposeful in how you present the fact that you are trying to cultivate a diverse workforce. And, within the industry, you're supportive of these efforts.
That is great. I want to see if any of the other panelists have something to add here. Otherwise, happy to kind of move on to other questions.
Can I just, what
yes.
Ray just said is really, really critical. A picture says 1,000 words, right? The image of you wanting to enter an organization that is truly representative of our population and inclusive and welcomes diversity of thought and perspective is really, really important. And you're right, it can be really off-putting if you look at a panel where it's not inclusive, or you don't see people that look like you. And that also includes, I know we talk about diversity, but diversity does also include the disability community, yes. Right? And to truly be inclusive and allow for that belonging. So I think, Ray, what you said is really important. And that's what I think CEOs and executives need to be thinking about when you're reaching out to hire talent, because they may turn you away because you don't look or representative.
Yeah, and just to that note, also, I just want to mention, because I know we're talking about internal teams, but also it comes down to advisory boards, scientific advisory boards. I mean, diversity across the entire sector of talent, engaging with organizations, because all of that makes a big difference, as everyone stated so far.
Ingrid, you briefly had your hand up.
I did. I was going to say what Lauren said, but as well, I think that the most important thing that has to occur within an organization is that it has to start at the top. The leader has to absolutely believe in it, and then that has to become part of the culture. So as Netta pointed out, and as Ray was talking about, when people come into a company, they do look around. Who else is working here? Do I think I'm going to be comfortable here? How do they represent themselves out in the world? I mean, people are consumers that are very, very, very into, especially these young folks, they're into looking at who made this and who do they have working on it.
I absolutely appreciate that comment, and it speaks. Several of you have touched on it. It speaks to strategy, and strategy is generated at the top and on the outset. So when and how do we think about talent? These are so the companies in the cohort are somewhere between 2 and I'm going to say 20 to 30 people. So it's a vast gamut. But if I had to drop an average, and I know we have an average somewhere, but I'm going to say 5. So where do I start? How large should an organization be to start making a plan for talent? And that plan perhaps not just involving, I'm going to call my buddies and ask them, who do you know? I'm going to start with Lauren. What is the stage at which a company should make a strategic plan regarding talent and hiring?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest as early as possible, because every hire you make influences every future hire that you make. And companies do want to be thoughtful in terms of how they approach this. So for a lot of the emerging companies that I work with, I think it's also important to make sure that it's a long-term game, right? I know sometimes, there's needs people have, they want to hire right now, but talent is a long-term endeavor. So there's companies I work with that start thinking about their talent pipeline and start cultivating their talent pipeline, because it may take 6 months or a year for certain people to make a move into your organization, but without cultivating some of those relationships, it becomes challenging. And so everything for the, let's say, postdoc PhD talent coming in, starting to build relationships with universities and certain PIs, for example, or maybe getting involved with certain organizations, SACNIS, Abercams, a few others that, especially from a diversity perspective, where you can start to build relationships with people that could be helpful, mining literature, again, like finding who's in your space. And for the talent that's more senior that you want to bring in, starting to do things to help you become a little bit more visible in that world, to be able to help get some name recognition, to help build relationships for people. So I think it's never too early to start. And especially people need to get out of just their own network, because otherwise you're going to hire people that look like you and that are in the same kind of philosophies as you. And we all want diversity of thought and perspectives in these organizations.
I'd say to even put a finer point on it, if our default is to hire from our network and we determine that's the most efficient way to find good people, then our biggest investment should be in creating and cultivating a more diverse network. And so essentially just more of our effort should be, how do I learn and how can I be curious and how can I participate in activities that give me exposure to the other talent that's out there that doesn't look just like me.
Can I just stay there and ask you how? Is there a best, or actually I'm gonna take that back and let Ingrid respond to it first and then come back to you.
Unless Danica, you want to continue, in which case
please,
I will
go
hold
ahead.
it. Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things, and this is not a plug for Diversity by Doing, but we work with over 100 companies and we specifically plug in because they come to us and say, we want more diverse talent, we want more diverse interns, we want to support the folks that are within our organization right now that may not have, they may be one of them. So circling or surrounding yourself with institutions or organizations that promote that type of work, I think is incredibly important. You have to show that you're willing to invest your time to do this. So you want actionable things. I know that MedTech Color has a number of initiatives where there's support there. A lot of they're out there. All you have to do is start with one. I always say that. That's the flywheel. You start with one, and then all of a sudden, like you were saying earlier, Diane, once you're inside, you're not getting out. So the whole idea is just to begin. There's an old saying that says, what got you to where you are is not going to get you to where you're going.
I use that a lot when I work with startups. Danica, Ingrid might have made it easier for you to answer that question.
Definitely did. Yep. I threw a link in the chat. One commitment I've asked people around me to make is this +1. It's just the commitment to every month put an interview, respond to an inbound, or put an interview or an informational interview on your calendar that's outside your typical network, and just see where you can add to your own network. If in many cases, if the talent has, sort of the upper hand, then we do have to work a little bit harder to be curious about our network and find where we can make those connections. But taking one call that you wouldn't normally take a month is, 20 or 30 minutes each month. And that's not too much to ask.
I appreciate that tangible advice. Any other comments or feedback on that? What are some of the best practices around making sure that that you look for talent where it's to be found?
I would encourage everyone, look within the ecosystem for opportunities, again, to get out there, not necessarily, recruiting job fair, but you've got all sorts of events that are going on that are industry specific, things that are sponsored by different investor groups, different incubators, opportunities to pitch. And while there, always be promoting the fact that you're building a world-class team, right? Always get out into the ecosystem. You'll be with other entrepreneurs, other similar type businesses. And again, if you're purposeful in just making mention of the fact, we're planning to grow, this is our timeline, you're just raising awareness of the fact that, it's all about connecting and trying to get people to think of you when they encounter someone. And again, for you yourself, be a connector. Right. It's something that really it pays dividends. If you do the right thing by people, they'll help you out when you need it. So I always look and encourage entrepreneurs, get out there into the ecosystem and really just make connections, whether that's with other entrepreneurs, investors, service providers, be promoting yourself and your objective around how you're recruiting.
Can I jump in? Because everyone's saying, oh, sorry, Lauren, do you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead, Nada.
Everyone's saying these fantastic words that I actually use with my son in the morning because he just started school. And Danica said it first, the curious, right? So I say, be kind, be courageous, be curious. And then we throw in chocolate or another C word at the end. And Ray's hitting on it as well with the be kind, right? I'm getting that essence, and the curious piece is really critical. And I love the +1, like reach outside. But the medtech ecosystem is actually quite small. We think it's large, but you have some big names in it, and you can start there. But even starting there, and that's why I think MedTech Color is trying to say diversify MedTech, because there's these other nuggets and pockets doing things that you might not be aware of in the curious piece, and wanting to reach into that is where you're going to find the real talent, or like these hidden gems that you never would have come across had you gone to that same pool or your backyard or your friend's dad or whomever. That could really help you develop something that's really novel and meaningful to the problem you're trying to solve. Please, Lauren, thanks for letting me go. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Well, so I was just going to say, from an actionable standpoint too, like purposely engaging with like the graduate women in science groups that are close to where your companies are located, or like the regional chapters for groups like SACNIS or Biomedical Engineering Society or whatever. There's hundreds of these groups. But then not only can you say, yes, we support women or we support diversity, but you can say, last year our team spoke on 3 panels. And so it gives you a way to not just say it, but you actually can indicate it through your actions. And it's great also to raise visibility, because for startups, news, good news is usually really positive and allows you to create brand awareness, and it allows you to have opportunities to share. And that's great also, because it builds momentum as you're looking to expand your network and talent pool.
I really appreciate that advice, and that's really tangible advice for all of us as individuals. I'm now going to focus the lens on, what do I do as a company? How do I, maybe I am a wonderful human and I do all these things and I'm now a wonderful person, but how as a company do I establish myself as a small company with a limited marketing budget? How do I put myself out there in a way that makes people want to come work for me? What do I do to make my small organization seem attractive to future employees? Happy to throw it out to any of you. I just saw Danica go off mute, so I'm going to call on her.
Yeah, I'll jump in. There is something around celebrating the culture you're creating. So I always, to our portfolio companies, just try to highlight the companies that are really celebrating their culture on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a really easy place to post. You can come up with a very sophisticated social media schedule if you need to, but celebrating culture milestones and celebrating people within your organization is a really great way to just resonate and bring to life the culture you're trying to create. Now, that's assuming you're already creating a diverse culture where people, have a success plan within your organization. But the organizations that are able to celebrate, some of the paid time off, or picnics, or here's something interesting one of our employees is doing outside of workplace with their time, or hey, we took some time to give back to the community and here are a couple pictures of us all having fun together. Granted, you have to create those opportunities, but if your posts on LinkedIn, which is, I consider, the easiest place to showcase it, should be about celebrating culture and celebrating employees. The financial and fundraising and technical product advancements are interesting, but not interesting in as much in recruiting the diverse talent and, frankly, the driven talent that you want to attract.
Yeah, and for ideas related to that, I'm a big believer in borrowing liberally, right? And so I would suggest, look at the companies that you admire, look at the bigger established companies that, you're trying to draw talent from. Visit their website, look at their careers page, review their LinkedIn posts. They're going to give you great ideas about how you might want to present yourself. So you don't have to just dream it all up and create it yourself. Pick some companies that you think are top tier that you want to try and resemble and get some thoughts from them.
I'm going to add that, as you're beginning to develop your company, be really mindful of your presence. And that goes to your marketing materials, your website, everything else. Everybody goes to your website first. If I go to your website and I don't see anything that says, I really want to work there, then I'm going on to the next. And so I know there are a lot of people out there that have whole talent pages. Even if you're a small organization, you can talk about the culture you want to create and basically create that.
Yeah, and actually, I would also add to that, ideally, you'd have kind of a values section where you highlight what's important to you as an organization, because that comes up all the time in talking with talent, especially talent that is emerging, where these things are really, really important to them.
Go ahead. Yep.
I was just going to say, we find talent in the most interesting places, on planes. Just starting conversations with people can lead to amazing outcomes. And I think now everyone's in the traveling mode or meeting in conferences, but that's part of growing your network, right? Maybe speak to that one person standing out there that looks interesting, but I wouldn't typically speak to them. Why not start that conversation? I think it's a very cheap and can be very fun way of recruiting talent. So conversations are great.
Yeah.
I can definitely buy into that. I see questions coming in on LinkedIn, and I'll get to that in a second. But I'd like to, for a brief second, stay on that culture that that several of you've brought up. Culture is really different when we're working remotely. So I want to jump into the geography considerations that come up. How do we build a culture? How do we build an organizational culture in a place where we work remotely? In the distance, misunderstandings can fester more easily. And so I'd be really curious to hear, honestly, from anyone on the panel, how we should think about culture in a distributed and remote workforce.
Well, it needs to be intentional, and irregardless of, on-site or remote, you're going to end up with a corporate culture, whether you're intentional or not, right? So best to own it, to be planful. I think it's really important to give definition to those mission values and use those as benchmarks in everything that you do. I mean, it's not just something that you're putting on a website, right? Publishing in a handbook. It's got to be core to the culture. And again, if you're publishing those types of things, if you're intentional, if you're talking to the mission, vision, and really incorporating that into the day-to-day, whether you're on site or remote, employees are going to get it. It's core to what they're doing. It's core to the business, to their relationship with the company. So you really have to make it a point to publicize it, always go back to it, and use it as one way that you're measuring success in the company, is being consistent to those values.
So thank you, Ray, for that, using that intentional word, because that's the word I always use. I mean, your engagement has to be intentional. When I talk to people and I don't see them very often in person, I make sure that the culture I'm trying to create is felt in that conversation. So that sometimes may be as simple as, how are you, before you go deep into whatever else there is. Or if there's common themes and things that you want to embrace within your organization, talk about that. Make sure you have that as part of the conversation. So there's the business of the business, but there's also the business of the culture.
I worked for an organization once. Part of the culture was holding doors, right? And so when you saw a colleague, you held the door for them, right? And it was making things easier for them. And that kind of got instilled throughout, right? So you're thinking internally how you can be helping your coworkers, your team members, and the like. But it's just it's things like that start out as just maybe on a whim, or again, hopefully you're being more purposeful about it, but you start to notice these opportunities, and if you just are repeating them and celebrating them, all of a sudden one day it's part of your core culture, right? So you don't have to be holding doors. You could be whatever you think's important, but you want to embrace those things.
And I think Ingrid said it well. It starts at the leadership, right? And it has to be genuine and authentic. So it's something you really want to create as part of your organization and have it be a lifetime approach. I think the how do you feel, right? We've been in this environment of a pandemic, and it's impacted people in so many different ways. And now people are trying to get back to whatever normal was, but they're realizing, did it need to be normal? Was that really normal? So everyone's normal is different now, right? And you are removed with you're on Zoom continuously, but how can you create those connections and that culture even in a remote environment? And the personality aspect, and I think you want to make it fun. My thing is lean into fun. Otherwise, why do you want to be there? And especially when you're remote, and even now when you're thinking of hiring talent, depending on what the job is, right? If you need an engineer on site, you might need to hire them locally. But if you're, hiring a communications person or a marketing person or a strategist, you could do that remotely. So, but how do you kind of transcend that culture across the ether?
Nada, you're setting it up really well for my next question, and that is geography in a more broad sense. Several of our companies are in other countries and are looking to expand into the US. And so then you're not just dealing with time differences, you're dealing with cultural differences, you're dealing with where do I even establish my US headquarters? So I'm wondering, and I'm asking you the question because you set it up, but I want to open it to the other panelists as well. How is it, where does one start when thinking about hiring in the US? It's a big country. Where do I start? How do I hire people? What are some unique considerations if I'm entering the US market new?
I mean, I can take this one to start because I deal a lot with, or I interact a lot with international companies looking to hire. And one of the most challenging initial aspects is the discussion around salary and benefits. And it's a lot different here than in other locations. And so I'm certainly happy to talk more with companies about this, but sometimes getting your head around competitive salaries and making sure the budget's appropriate for those activities for the top talent that people are looking for is something really important to be able to get a handle on as early as possible. Location can be a little bit agnostic in a sense because there's a lot of great hubs that can really support innovation, especially as we work in more of a remote setting.
Yeah, I would add that you really want to have good, trusted advisors that you're dealing with. It's incredibly complex to be an employer in the U.S. And I too do a lot of work with foreign-owned companies that are looking to establish a U.S.-based workforce. The draw for those clients to a company like TriNet is, it's a turnkey solution that provides expertise, not just in benchmarking around what's it going to cost from a salary standpoint, benefits, equity, and those types of things, but also from a compliance standpoint. It's important to understand when we talk about remote workforces, as you go from state to state, you've got different labor laws. God help us, your big metros are getting involved in it now too. So, laws are different as you go from Los Angeles to San Francisco to San Diego. It can become overwhelming. And, I would encourage those companies that are looking to establish, get good trusted advisors so you don't have to try and learn all this stuff yourself. They'll help you shortcut and avoid a lot of the pitfalls.
And I would say that when we talk about growth and we talk about going from a 3 to 5 person organization to 30 plus, A great advisor, like Ray is mentioning, will raise their hand when it's time for you to bring somebody on full time. So, getting somebody to do the legal outsourcing, the compliance outsourcing, when you're getting off the ground is great. But some of the best partners that we recommend are the ones that'll say, hey, our hours are really getting up there. It is time for you to bring somebody in-house, or at least a contractor, part-time person in-house, and they can usually facilitate recruiting that person for you. So I think that there is some value in finding the right partners at the right stage of your growth.
That's great. Appreciate that. I want to take a question from LinkedIn simply because I recognize otherwise I might not get to it. We have someone who's shared that they've worked at ortho and neurospine companies as a founder and early employee, and talent is a challenge to judge, not from a technical skills perspective. Aptitude and interpersonal skills are more important. And so weeding out candidates that may technically be qualified, but will bring unconscious bias and may not be a good fit. Leaders need to place team members on the right seat on the bus, and sometimes move certain people to other seats on the bus or get them off the bus. Does the panel agree? I'm going to just leave that open to the panel. This is a tricky one, right? First of all, how do we judge people? And then how do we shuttle people around in our organization so that the right person is in the right situation and avoids bringing the unconscious bias that we all may have to the table in their decisions?
I have a pretty oversimplified answer. I do spend a lot of time assessing talent and advising leadership on how to assess talent. Similar to the culture, you need to have a few questions or a few metrics that really bring the qualities to life that you're looking for. In some cases, there are statistics out there that resourcefulness or resiliency can be a more powerful skill than, say, the academic reasons. Obviously, there's some very technical issues involved here. And so you would have a technical screener to help determine if a candidate's good on the technical front, but in terms of fit and flexibility and kindness and that sort of the team and family mindset you want in this workplace where we spend a lot of our time, have a couple of metrics or have a couple of questions that get right to the heart of what you're looking for. I would really overplay that that's important to you as an organization, and have a couple of examples on where this has worked out well and where this has been an area of conflict within our teams. And, in terms of moving people around, it can be as simple as really shorthand defined scorecards for their role. In many cases, employees and potential employees want to know how to be successful within a new organization. And so if you can map out, this is what we want you to really be focused on in the first 90 days. This is what we'd like to look at for an annual goal. It can even get to, how do I keep people around for the long term? Very frankly, in a competitive talent market like this, you might not have them around for this sort of 10-year horizon that seems very elusive to people. If you can get very specific things accomplished in 1 to 2 years, then that is a success in many cases. And you might then be able to reevaluate based on those metrics. Are we similar to what Ingrid said, is this the fit? Is this the team that we need to get us to the next stage? And that's a much easier conversation to have when you have it really laid out.
I want to add that, a lot of times when you interview or you talk to candidates, and I'm not in the position of hiring a lot of talent, but I will tell you that when people apply to work with me, and particularly because of the work that I do, I ask them specifically if they are invested in, whatever our North Star is. And then I ask them, how do you do that? Well, demonstrate to me what you do in relation to that initiative that I just talked to you about. Because then you'll find out whether they're just speaking the speak or whether they're actually involved in making the difference that you want to see make. So I would just throw that out there because it's one of my standards when I talk to people, because it is easy to say, yes, I'm passionate about X or Y, but are you really? And let me see, because, when you're a small team and you start bringing in people, I'm not going to say the one bad apple, but goodness does breed goodness. So you want to bring in the best talent that you possibly can at the earliest stages. And so you have to vet for all of that.
Yeah, and I also want to, this is probably a given, I'm guessing that people think about, but I think it's important also to have, if you're small, to have the entire team interview with people, because certain individuals may act differently with to senior members than to junior members. And it's really important, I think, to take everyone's feedback into account as you end up engaging. And just one other, like a question I love to ask talent is something simple like, you know, how have you contributed to the culture in your last place or in your academic lab or wherever it may be? Because again, if people think about this and if they hopefully have contributed well, they'll be excited to share stories, and you can really listen to what that is as you're engaging with talent.
I would say it's also, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ingrid.
Ray, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say it's very important also to give a realistic job preview, right? So as we're recruiting, there's a tendency, obviously we love our company, right? We want to tell all the good things about it and you know, pump it up, and that's well and good, but it's really, really important in terms of just setting expectations, right? The best hires are made when that new hire comes in, that new employee, and they set the right expectation with you about their skill set, their values and such. And likewise, the company's got to reciprocate. And, you know, if there are things that are particularly challenging or, you know, not everything's good, right? There's good and bad with all. So I think it's very important and very fair to any candidate that you provide them with a very realistic job preview.
Sorry, Ingrid, I'll jump in and then I'll let you. I mean, Ray, again, is hitting the nail on the head. You need to set them up for success, right? Because then you've set them up for failure if you haven't been transparent. And the job is not all fun. There's got to be some stuff that's not fun, and that's in anywhere you go to. But it's also, you know, balancing it, actually being fair and balanced, right? Otherwise you fail. And then to the point of moving, maybe someone who's not working out in a current position, I think inaction is a big message in and of itself. And as we said from the start, people are watching, people are listening. If you let bad behavior go, it's a bit like a parent, right? Someone else says, well, it's not fair, it's not balanced, so I can have bad behavior. But I think it's upon you as a leader to take action and address stuff up front. And I think transparency in an organization and heightened communication is so important in terms of setting up a culture. Here's how we address bad issues, and here's how we celebrate wins as well. So, you know, just adding on to the amazing advice everyone else is giving. So thanks. Ingrid, I'm sorry, you were going to
couldn't possibly add any more after you and Ray, so thank you.
Fantastic. Let me ask you this. You know, some folks, so over the last couple of days, I've had a lot of conversations with our startups, and several have increased their headcount, and several are still looking for people. And we have Tori in the chat who's saying sometimes talent is hard to find. How do I know if my problems with hiring are due to the fact that my process is wrong? I am just doing it wrong. Or can I improve my recruitment process? How do I know I'm not doing it right? I'm not finding the right talent. There's plenty of people out there looking for jobs. Can I perhaps start with you, Lauren? How do I know my process is wrong?
Well, yeah, it's a great point. I mean, part of it would be making sure you're analyzing information and being, I guess, quantitative in that, so that way it helps with the assessment. But I mean, one thing to realize, if I look at places like Boston, and I'm sure that San Francisco is similar, I mean, there are thousands of jobs and probably hundreds of people, or maybe tens of people that fit certain jobs for certain roles that we're looking for. And so in some cases, it may take, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months to be able to find the right person, because there just are not thousands of people suddenly available for the specific skill sets that organizations are looking for. So part of that also comes back to, similar to earlier comments, making sure you have people you can reach out to, you build relationships with people that are in HR, that are in other aspects, to try to help you, at least with insight, if not with actual talent acquisition, as well.
Ray, I'm going to call on you. I remember in our prep call, you called yourself a culture warrior. And so I'm sure you have an opinion on just process and how I would know that my process isn't working.
Yeah, I mean, so you've heard me mention repeatedly being intentional, right? It's very hard as an entrepreneur. You're juggling a lot of balls. You're trying to get a lot done. And to say, I'm going to take time to give definition to, what is the process we were talking moments ago about? What are the questions that I'm asking, right? How am I measuring success of a particular business? You need to give definition to all of these things, really, to be able to, when you have the right candidate in front of you, to be able to measure them appropriately, to be able to move quickly, right? To be able to move confidently. And then also, again, you really want to have the right stable of advisors, and whether that's your service providers, whether that's your advisory board, whether that's other entrepreneurs, that, have gone through similar circumstance. Share what you're doing, ask for feedback. The problems that I see, the companies that stall, are the ones that never get out from under their own roof, right? They're trying to solve all the problems themselves. And, there are lots of people, someone had mentioned earlier, the med tech space, it is a fairly small community. It seems big at times, but, it's also fairly supportive too. I know the market that I'm in here in San Diego, it's amazing how supportive folks are of other startups, right? So I would just encourage you, give definition to it. And if you're doubtful at all, go seek feedback from sources that you trust.
I think that's good advice. I want to play on that a little bit, figuring out what your process is. When you figure out, how do I know if it's broken? Let's really understand what our process is. A couple of things that come up is just the hemming and hawing that can happen when you're like, hey, I need somebody. Where should I find somebody? Let's start asking within our network. Let's wait 2 weeks till our network gets back to us. Next board meeting, who's talked to whom? That's where this, a sense of urgency and clarity could be helpful. I try to encourage any search process that I get involved with that within a few days, we have the defined job scope, we have the needs, we have the technical screeners, we have who's going to be the decision maker lined up. That's stuff that you can decide relatively quickly, and you can then give that to a valuable search partner. The second thing I would say is just, as you're planning to grow, plan to identify experts in the field that will help you find the talent you need. In my case, that is really trusted search partners. I think that good search partners, and I know that there's stories of searches going on and forever, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody that's going to hustle in a couple of weeks to sort of get you what you need, but also ask you the questions. Hey, this is what the candidates are saying in the marketplace. Are you looking for this type of phenotype versus that type of phenotype? That clarity, if you can get that clarity organized quickly, that goes a long way. And then I would take a really hard look at the candidate experience going through whatever your process is. I don't know if this is addressing the question, but I always give the advice, don't let the sun go down on Friday without touching base with the candidates that you have in the pipeline. Nobody likes that dead space over the weekend. They can turn off very quickly. This is not necessary, this is all relationships, but go all out for the candidates. Don't be worried that you're going to sort of overplay your cards and tell them you love them too much and they'll get scared off. This is not dating. This is going out for the candidates that you think can really add to your organization. And don't be afraid to say, Gosh, I don't have the answer. It's Friday. I don't have the answer, but I want you to know that we at least wanted to touch base with you because we want this to be, I'll give you the answers I can. It sounds kind of silly, but I think it has gone a long way to just keep interested candidates feeling like there's enough love going around that they don't fall into that uncertainty spiraling.
I appreciate that
Yeah, and I guess
perspective.
to that
Lauren,
point,
go ahead.
Make sure you have a way to actually keep track of your candidates, because I mean, applicant tracking systems are not that complicated anymore. They're not that expensive, relatively speaking. Greenhouse or Lever or others, or even just like an Excel sheet or Notion board or whatever. So that way you don't have to, I don't know, I just see a lot of companies that are smaller sometimes have people coming in from all over the place and they don't have a way to actually keep track of them. And then it makes it hard to follow up. And that can be really tough, especially if you get referrals from your network. And then if for some reason they kind of drop through the process, that doesn't look awesome in terms of additional referrals you might get.
I think what Danica, my apologies, said is really important, that follow-up. It speaks to culture, right? Heightened communication, transparency, intentionality that we're talking about. We care and we're trying to figure it out. And you also say, oh, if I don't know, but I'm figuring it out. You're also leading by example, right? And that's going to be a draw in. And again, if it doesn't work out with that candidate, though, to Lauren's point, they might refer a friend, right? Because they had such a good interaction with you. I think someone said it well, like how you make people feel is more than what they'll remember. It's not what you necessarily said, unless what you said caused a reaction, but it's the feeling, how you leave people after that conversation is really critical. So
I'm hearing Maya Angelou in the offing. That is fantastic. I can only appreciate that. I am looking at the time and I want to give all of you an opportunity to potentially share any resources or where and how the folks listening to us on the live stream can find more information, resources you found useful, basically that pertain to recruiting and hiring, to many of the things we discussed before we bid our live stream audience goodbye. And I'm happy to have you go in any order. Happy to have you jump in.
Since I went off mute, I'll say one resource that I think is really great is parity.org, particularly for the small and mid-sized companies, because they actually look at all the different ways you can evaluate whether you have parity within your organization in multiple categories. They have something called a key findings report. Right now they do this for women, but they're doing it for people of color in the next segment. And then, of course, I welcome everybody and anybody to take a look at what Diversity by Doing Health Tech does, because we have at least, we have 4 programs currently to support anything that you're trying to do in that space of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging with your talent pool. And that's for your senior executives, as well as looking for talent coming in.
Excellent. Who else wants to jump in with words of advice or resources?
So I'm going to put a few groups in the chat box of diversity conferences and organizations. These are just a few. I know many, many more, but that could help in terms of your reach out into different sectors.
Fantastic. Appreciate that.
And I would say MedTech Color, it's medtechcolor.org. We have a membership. We have a very diverse network community. Our goal, like we said, is to increase the representation of people of color who enter MedTech, stay in MedTech, and move up to decision-making positions. So I think you can find a lot of talent there. We work with early startups and support them as well. To Ingrid's point, we have a number of programming to really help improve outcomes through intentional, like diversifying MedTech and being intentional about it.
I would just encourage folks, not that nobody's heard of LinkedIn, but I think it really makes a lot of sense to understand the full capabilities in regards to recruiting, get familiar with it, follow candidates, use it to make announcements around new hires and tag those people so that everyone connected to that person knows there's a company out there that's hiring folks like that. It's really the technology just within that application alone is gotten so rich, and I'd encourage you, spend a little bit of time to figure out exactly how you can leverage that, because there's a lot that can come from it. And obviously it's widely used. It's a first stop for anyone who's even remotely thinking about changing jobs.
I jumped in and said it earlier, but trusted search partners within the functional areas that you need help recruiting, have those on hand and be cultivating those relationships as well, so that when you need to turnkey an entire department of hiring, you have the right people on hand to help you.
With that, I want to thank you personally on behalf of MedTech Innovator and the startups for being here. And we're going to stop the live stream. Stay on. We're going to give the startups an opportunity to ask you questions.